Hello quilters, and welcome once again to one of our quilting lessons. Today we're going to talk about the amazingly simple triangle stars. And this is the little block that we get when we put that little pattern together. Our resource for this project is this book, Amazingly Simple Triangle Stars by Barbara H. Klein. And if there are those of you who are unfamiliar with the book, you want to get it and try your hand at making some of these stars. I found out, however, that as my quilting group and I were working with this project, some of the directions were a little bit vague and a little bit confusing. So I created this video to see if I could make this a little clearer and to help everyone to be successful with putting these stars together. So this video is just about the star block. There will be another video later about how to put all of the blocks together into a final project. But first, we really need to know how to put the star block together. So we're going to start with that. I drew this little chart to help simplify and better explain what we're asking you to do. You're putting together a triangle, and over in block 1, square 1, you see drawn just a simple triangle. That's what we're working with. Everything we're doing is based on this simple triangle. Somewhere along the way, the author and or her designee drew lines on that triangle, and they created these 5 parts of the triangle. The center part we're calling A because our templates in the back of the book call it A. This first little inset here on the left is B. Then we have another little part, that's C. Then we have D and DR. And we want to put them together in that order as well. Following your alphabet, you can get this block together with very little trouble. Now look at square 3. The 5 parts of the triangle have been cut apart. And I want you to be able to see that. You've got A in the middle, B is to the left, C is to the right, D is to the left, to the right, and DR is to the left. And when you cut your fabric and sew those back together, you get what you see in square 4. We get the triangle put together. This time it's put together in fabric, and the drawing there mimics this little block that I have put together. And once again, we're putting a triangle together. This is A, this is B, C, D, DR. And notice that when you put your triangle together, there are some things you really want to pay attention to. You want to make sure that you use a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance throughout the project. Because we're working with small pieces, we don't have any way that we can fudge the seam allowance. So put a marking on your sewing machine or use a 1/4 of an inch foot. Whatever you have to do that will make sure you are consistent with the seam allowance and that you stay with the 1/4 of an inch seam allowance throughout the project. Okay, I have our strips laid out on the table ready to be cut. And I want to say a little bit about those strips so that once again there's no confusion about how to cut the strips. The book will tell you that in order to cut A, template A, you need to have a 3 1/4 inch strip of fabric cut selvage to selvage across the width of the fabric. My strips are shorter because I used fat quarters, so I don't have that long strip that you will get if you use fabric. Now, the neat thing about cutting A, I can cut several strips together, and I think I have 3 stacked here. Yes. Keep in mind that each block has only one A. So I can stack my strips with all of them with the right side facing up. Stack all of the strips that I'm going to cut. You could cut 3 or 4 or 5 maybe, depending upon the size of your rotary cutter and the sharpness of the blade. But you can have several strips, but make sure with A, all of the strips are facing such that they have right sides together. Now the template is very helpful in getting you started. Notice that the template has that little arrow on the side. We're going to take that arrow, lay it down on the side of the fabric, on the edge, and we can begin to cut template A. And let me get my rotary cutter, and I will show you how we go about doing that using A. I'm going to talk about B and C in a minute, but I'll get those out of the way. Okay, I've got the ruler down on the edge of the template. And remember that you want to make sure your template has been put against something that's very substantial. And I'm just going to cut right along the edge of the ruler, trying not to shave any of the template off. Now, here's a situation where you don't want to move that piece of fabric. So if you have a smaller cutting board, use your smaller cutting board so that you can move the fabric without disturbing it. If you don't have a small cutting board, move yourself. Walk around the table until you're standing at an angle whereby you can cut this and not have any problems, and that you definitely don't move the fabric. And I'll turn it one more time, and I will have cut out 3 of the A templates or pieces. Okay, here is A, and I've cut out 3 because I had 3 strips, one on top of each other. And in each case, the right side was facing up. That's crucial to remember with A. Every block has only one A. There's only one A in every block. So you don't want to put it so that it's facing their right sides together or wrong sides together. You want to make sure that for those 3 strips, all 3 of them or 4 of them, 5 of them, however many you cut at one time, make sure they are all facing up, and you won't have any problems with what you have cut. Okay, let's look at B. B is one of the smaller pieces that goes on the inset. Okay, here's B, and I have template B. And I'm going to lay the template down just as I should, right there on that strip. And in order to cut B and C, you need a strip that is 1 1/4 inches wide. Now, when you cut B out, once again, you can cut several of them at one time. You can put all of them right side facing up. I have 2 strips here, and both strips are right side facing up. That's just like A. Cut them with the right side facing up, no matter how many strips you choose to cut at one time. Right side facing up. Put the template down on the piece of fabric. Let me get this turned around here so that it begins to make a little more sense to both you and me. And now we are ready to cut. And in this case, most of the work has been done for us because you can see that the strip is the same width as the template. So essentially all I need to do is cut here on this end and cut here on this end. And I'm going to do it the very same way using my ruler. I'll put the ruler on the edge of the template. I do not want to cut the template. And I'll just move that out of the way. And once again, I'm using my small cutting board so I can just turn the fabric without disturbing it. Some of you may have the rotating cutting board. That's excellent for this project. If it's stacked away somewhere and you have it, you know you've got it, go find it and use it for cutting the pieces for this project. Okay. Now I have cut 2 B's out. They're just alike, right sides together. That's exactly how they should be. Because once again, when you look at the block, there is only 1 B in the block. I don't need 2 of them for this block. I only need 1 B in the block. I have 1 A. Now I had 1 B. And next I'm going to cut a C. And there's only 1 of them in each block. That's important to remember because that might help you to cut these in a way that you are successful. Okay, here's C. C is a lot like B. The width of the strip is 1 1/4 inches. It's the same width as the template. And we just lay the template on the strip, right side up, both of them. The right side of the fabric is up. Please do not put it any other way, right side up. When you're cutting several strips together, all of them must have the right side up. If it's A, B, or C, the right side up. For each of the strips you're cutting at a time, make sure you have the right side facing you with each strip that you cut. Okay, so using my ruler once again, I'm going to cut C from these 2 strips of fabric. And I make sure that I put my ruler right on the edge of the template because I don't want to shave the template. That's why we use the ruler. Because if you just use that little piece of paper, there's always a chance that you're going to cut off part of it. And what happens, it gets shaved so much that the last piece you cut using that template is smaller than the first piece you cut with it. So you don't want to shave the template. You want to keep the template intact. And one of the ways to assure that we can do that is by using our ruler and letting the blade of your rotary cutter go right beside the ruler. And here I have cut C. There are 2 C's cut from strip of fabric, and these will be used in 2 blocks because I only need 1 of them for each block. Keep that in mind. Going back to our block again, the one in the middle is A, here is B, and here is C. And when you begin to cut these and store them, make sure you don't put B's and C's together in a little baggie. That can be a little bit confusing, but they do have a slightly different shape that might help you to tell one from the other. But when I store them, I make sure they're not together. I don't let them see each other until I'm ready to sew them together in the block. C has much larger, a much deeper angle on both ends. C does, and B has this slight side here. But it's better to not store them together. You're cutting a bunch of them out. Get a baggie for B, put all of your B's in there. Get a baggie for C, put all of your C's in that. Then when you get to your sewing machine, you're not confused and you're ready to sew these together. Now let's talk about D. D is the guy that's a little bit different. And you know you have to have at least one thing that's going to give you a challenge, and so D does that. With D, we need a mirror image. Say that again. With D, I need a mirror image. And so D is here. DR, that mirror image, is here. This is the piece that you're going to cut with right sides together. A, B, and C, we cut with all of the right sides facing up. D, we have to cut with right sides together. And that's what I have here in front of me. You're looking at, here are the right sides, those beautiful stars. Notice I have right sides together. That's how I'm going to cut these two strips, because D requires a mirror image, and the way that I get that mirror image is to put right sides together. And so here we go. I love the fact that it has that little arrow on it again. There's the arrow, you can see that. It has a little arrow, and we're going to put the arrow on one of the straight sides, just like you see me doing here. The height of this template is the same as the width of the strip, so we don't have to do a lot of cutting. We really have to cut this side and this side initially. And so that's what I'm going to do now. Putting my ruler on the edge of the template. And for some of you, if you're wondering where the templates were, they are in the back of the book that I showed you initially. And so here we go. I'm going to turn this little cutting board around. Going to make sure everything is straight. Because usually if we make mistakes in quilting, our mistakes start with the cutting. So we want to be really careful when we're cutting, and that is going to help diminish some of the mistakes that might crop up later. You don't want cutting mistakes because they're almost impossible to correct. If you make a mistake in sewing, you've got a seam ripper and you can take them loose. Okay, here is D. I've cut it out. You're looking at the wrong side. I'm going to open it up. Now I have a mirror image. I have D and DR. And when you get ready to sew them onto the block, as I'm going to demonstrate in a minute, you'll see exactly how that works. But you have to get a mirror image. You have to put right sides together when you cut the strips so that you can get a mirror image. And you can see that they mirror each other. They're not the same. They're not the same at all. But they mirror each other. It's as if one is looking in the mirror and it sees its reflection. It's crucial that you remember that, because here we go. One of them goes here and one goes here. And I can assure you, and you'll see it when I'm sewing, that they're not interchangeable. So you're going to remember you will have to kind of turn them around until you get a feel for them. But one will only fit here, and the other will only fit there. And when you try to make them fit in other places, interchange them, they won't. So, having done the cutting, I do want to show you one more thing about the cutting. These are very easy to do, and the same thing holds true for the other pieces. Here's the fabric for D once again. And I've cut a mirror image for one. That's just one block. Here's what I can do for the next block, and I don't waste fabric. This time, notice the arrow is down at the bottom of the fabric. And since I had that little cut on the edge there, that's where I just cut previously to get the first set of D's out. Now I only have to use that same cutting line, abut my template to that line, and all I need to do now is cut the next set of D's for the next block. Using the ruler close to the template. And if there's anyone wondering about these templates and how you can get them a little bit sturdy, I just use some regular Elmer's glue, Elmer's glue, rubber cement glue, and took some old folders. And I think there are about 2 or 3 folders that are glued together Then I glued the template onto it, cut that out, and so it has some, it is a little sturdy. It has some strength to it, so that I'm not too able to cut it, but I still use the ruler. And so there's the next set of D's. And I can go back, put the arrow on the other side, laying this down very carefully. And I love being able to do this because I don't waste fabric. Sometimes we cut things and we're not quite aware of how easily we can cut them, and we don't have to waste fabric. And so here's another set of D's, and I could keep going with this. But now I want to take you to the sewing machine and show you how we're going to sew these pieces together to construct our triangle. And let's go back to where we started. Somebody saw a triangle, and somebody decided they could take that triangle, cut it into 5 parts, then cut those parts apart, put fabric, use them to cut fabric, and then sew the fabric together. And that's what we're about to do right now. Okay, I'm at the sewing machine, and first I want you to see how I have my pieces lined up. I make sure B and C are not together, and right now I have the template on each one so you can see them. But I have B here, A is in the middle, C, and then D. And that's the order in which I'm going to sew them, so it makes sense for me to line them up this way so that I don't have to reach around or search around. I have them in the correct order in which I need them so that I can easily sew them together. The other thing you will want to have nearby is your pressing station. And I have my iron and ironing board to my right, and I can just turn around and press, because you must press each seam as you stitch it. Otherwise, you can't sew the next seam. So I'm going to get started sewing and then show you that I sew, I press, I sew, I press, I sew, I press. Okay, here we go. We're at the machine. Everything is set up. And so I'm going to pick up A and B. Here is an A, and I'm going to pick up a B. Now, notice that this would give me, if I leave it just like this before I sew it, you see that nice straight line that comes down from the top? Straight right there with B. That's what you want when you have finished sewing it and you trim the dog ears. So keep that in mind, and I tend to lay them like that first. Maybe I just like to see it. But now I need to flip this to right sides together. And when I have it right sides together, I need to put that little dog ear up. See the little dog ear right there? That has to extend 1/4 of an inch above the A fabric. And when I do that and sew this down to the end, I know I have a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. You're going to do whatever you need to do to help you see that 1/4 of an inch dog ear that sticks up. And I don't always leave things to chance. I put a couple of pins in this seam, sitting right here like this, so that I don't have any fabric shifting while I am stitching. I want it to stay exactly like I've put it. Also notice that the two edges, the edges of both fabrics, are together. I don't have one that sits out further than the other. You want to make sure those edges are together and that you're using a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. Now, in my case, I have a 1/4 of an inch presser foot on my machine. But I need to make sure that when I start stitching, I'm going to stitch right here in this well. I'm putting a line there. And the well is created by A fabric making a V with the B fabric. That little well right there is where we start stitching. And that's what I'm going to do right now. And this is not a block that you can rush with. You really want to take your time as you stitch this block. And you want to go slowly and maintain your 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. If your sewing machine will let you adjust the speed, my suggestion is adjust it to one of your slower speeds, so that if you accidentally press down heavily on the little press on the foot, it still won't go but so fast. Okay. Clip the threads. Now you see my dog ear. There's the little dog ear sticking up. And let's see what I've done. When I press this, notice how without the dog ear, I'm going to have a nice straight line between these two pieces that have been sewn together. And that's what you want to do. And in pressing your seam allowance, press your seam allowance toward the piece you just sewed on. So in this case, I sewed B on, sewed it on to A. The seam allowance will be pressed toward B. And I'm just kind of waiting for my iron to heat up, and I can turn over here to my right and press this. Okay, and here's my straight side. You see the straight side right there? That's what you want when you sew yours. That's going to help you to know that you have sewn it correctly if you still have that straight side. Okay, now I've got B on there. The next piece that I need to sew on to A is C. And once again, I've got a dog ear. Here's the dog ear right there. I've got a little dog ear, so I'm going to make sure it extends above. I can't see it so well, so you pick it up, you flip it over until you can see that that dog ear is 1/4 of an inch above fabric A. And here again, I'm going to put some pins in it. I don't leave that to chance. Once I get them lined up, I want them to stay lined up, and I don't want any shifting in the fabric while I'm sewing. I want the edges to stay where they should be, one right on top of the other. I don't want a piece of fabric to slide out further over the other piece of fabric, so I put pins in. And once again, I'm going to do what I did the last time. I'm going to start sewing right here in this little well. It's the well that is created between the A fabric and the C fabric. And that's where my sewing will start. And you keep sewing all the way to the end. C overlaps B. And here's what your seam looks like. I started here in the well. You can see the threads hanging out of the well. And I sewed all the way down, and I have used C to cover B down on the end. Now I'm going to press, and I'm going to press, and it will look like this, and I'll know if I'm in the right, if I've done it correctly, because I should have a straight side right there. Let's see what I have after I press it. Okay, There we go. See the straight side here? Straight side there. Now I am ready to put D on this block. So I'm going to get a set of Ds. Now when I finish cutting my Ds, I put all of them together in pairs and put a pin on them because I didn't want them all mixed up and I wouldn't be able to tell D from DR. I know that one has to go on one side and one on the other. Okay, let's look at this. Sometimes you think you've got it right and you don't have it right. And I'll tell you why this doesn't work. If you look across the bottom of the triangle, it's not flat. It's not a straight line. It's not even. So this is in the wrong place and this is in the wrong place. Watch what happens when I switch them out. Now look at the bottom of the triangle. You see that it's straight across. That's a clue you're going to use to make sure you have put DR and D in the correct places. Try it again. I'm going to show you that one more time. When they're not in the right place, we don't have a flat bottom down here. And the bottom of a triangle is flat. So that's a clue. I don't have them where they should be. I need to switch them over. No problems. Long side of the triangle D, and look at what happens at the bottom of the triangle. We get a straight line. And so I'm going to sew D onto C, press it, and then sew DR onto B. So I'm just going to leave this here in this way, put it right beside my sewing machine, right sides together. And once again, you've got a dog ear. See the little dog ear? You've got a little dog ear. That should be 1/4 of an inch. And I turn it over to make sure. Okay, here it is. I can pick it up and show you. There's my dog ear, 1/4 of an inch above the C fabric. And notice the well. See, there's the well that we get started with we start our sewing with. I'm going to flip it over so that it's in the right way for me to stitch it. And I want to put pins in. Remember, I use pins to keep those little pieces together until I have finished sewing the seam. And there's nothing wrong with using pins, folks, if they will help you to be accurate. This is one of those blocks that really demands accuracy in order for its true beauty to show through. Okay, it's pinned. Now let me sew D onto C. And I'm starting in that well again, and I'll mark it one more time. There's the little well, the space where C comes down to a point and D meets it at that point. That's where we're going to start sewing. Also, put your pins in such a way that you can take them out as you're sewing. You don't want to sew over them with your sewing machine. That is not good for your sewing machine. Okay, let's see if I maintain my straight line. Yep. See the straight line coming down here? Now I need to press, and then we will put DR onto B. Okay, there is the block. It's almost complete. It just needs DR over here, and we're going to put that on it right now. And I laid DR down just as it was when it was here on the bed of the sewing machine, so I wouldn't have to adjust it again. I knew it was facing the correct way because I laid it down that way. And here we go again, right sides together. I've got a dog ear that I should see, and it should be 1/4 of an inch above the B fabric, and I want the sides of those edges together. And you want to take your time and do all of this, because then you're going to have blocks that you're very, very proud of. And use pins. Use as many pins as you think you need. Just don't put them in so that you can sew over them, because that is not good for your sewing machine. If your needle nicks one of these pins, you need to change the needle. Otherwise, you're going to have problems with the needle not going into your fabric appropriately. Okay, start in the well again, just like I did in all other instances. And I have a well between the D fabric and the B fabric. The other thing about that well, if you start directly in that well, you will create a 1/4 of an inch seam allowance. And you notice that I eyeballed that little dog ear at the top. And that's because I've done so many of these. But if you find it difficult to eyeball that, set up a way that you can measure that. Put a little piece of tape or marking on the bed of your sewing machine and lay it on there to make sure that that dog ear is 1/4 of an inch above the fabric. And so let's press it and see what we have. We're going to check for the straight line again. We always check for the straight line, the straight side that's going down the side of the triangle. Okay, here we go. Let's see what I've done. Did I achieve my goal? I've got a straight side going down here, a straight side there. I'm going to trim some dog ears, and we will be through with this block for now. We still have some trimming to do at the bottom, but I don't want to get that going yet. I want you to make the block. I want you to successfully cut out your pieces, and then I want you to successfully sew those pieces together. Then we'll talk about what has to be done down here. You see how that's uneven? We have some directions for that, but I'm going to end this video right now, and your job is going to be to cut your pieces out as I demonstrated earlier. Once you have cut your pieces out, remember that you are going to cut several strips of A. All of the strips will face up. All of the right sides will face up. You'll have several strips of B. All of the right sides will be facing you. Several strips of C. All of the right sides will face you. And then you'll have D. I would suggest that you not try to cut a bunch of D's at one time. You have 2 strips, right sides together this time, so that you get a mirror image. This is the only one that we have to worry about right sides together right now. Later on, there is another template that we'll have to cut right sides together. But you're not interested in that. You're not even going to be concerned about that. Right now, all you want to do is get this block together. That little piece down at the bottom, that's going to happen to every one of you. Don't worry about it. Don't do anything with it. Let's just sew the number of blocks you need for your project. If you have the book, you have decided whether you're making a table runner, a throw, a twin size quilt, queen size quilt, whatever the size may be, or some size in between. But you have to know, you have to get the blocks made first so that you can sew those together to make the project you want to make. And if you take the time to redo this video over and over again, that's fine. Keep in mind that you're just sewing a triangle together. Somebody cut a triangle apart into 5 pieces. You're putting those 5 pieces back together. I hope this helps, and I hope that you will not have any real problems with making the block. And once again, make as many blocks as you need for the project the size project that you have chosen. In the next video, I'm going to show you what to do with this bottom edge, and we will start talking about cutting the set-in triangles for the side and the set-in triangles for the corner of your project. Happy sewing, and I wish you the very best.